This is Power Trading Radio Live. Power Trading Radio Live, fueled by Online Trading Academy. For more information on the show, visit us online at powertradingradio.com. Now, here's your host, Merlin Rothfeld.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Power Trading Radio. As you can see, Merlin's not here today. He's taken a bit of an early break for the holidays that are coming up. Well-deserved break, I might add. But we have another guest today, and this has kind of been Austrian Economics Week. And our go-to guy for Austrian economics, if we want something explained to us in clear American English, is Dr. Richard Ebeling. He's a professor of economics, one of the senior Austrian economists in our country, and he teaches at the Citadel. So, Richard, welcome to our show.
It's great to be back with you. Thanks for having me on once more.
On December 16th, I believe it was the American Institute for Economic Research published one of your articles that I absolutely loved. And the title of the article is The Miracle of the Free Market. And I want to go over the principles that you outline in this article. And you start out the article in this way, if I may quote it briefly. One of the great fallacies arrogantly believed in by those in the political power is the notion that they can know enough to manage and command the lives of everyone in society with better results than if people are left to live their own lives and they freely choose. The fact is, far more in the world that successfully manages and regulates itself without the controlling hand of government that many of us pause to reflect on or understand, and that is the free market. Richard, why is this so important, and why is this so difficult to get the wisdom of markets across to the politicians and others that seem to lean to the left in American society?
Well, it's a good question. I think that part of the reason is that most of what we do every day on a daily basis reflects a situation in which something is designed and planned by us. We decide to build a house, and we hire an architect, or there's a builder already who has his architectural blueprints. We plan our education, where we're going to go to school, what kind of job we're going to try to have, and everything seems to be very directed according to plan. And that is true. All of us make our individual plans. But if one looks over the society as a whole, there is no overarching plan. The fact is, each of us pursue our own ends and purposes and goals and dreams and desires and successfully interact with everyone else in that society without someone commanding, controlling, directing, prohibiting, insisting, and that's done by the market. The analogies that I make in the article, near the beginning of the article, is that think of the laws of nature. The planets revolve around the sun, the moon revolves around the earth, and we don't think about the laws of gravity that keeps all of our universe in order. It just operates on its own. And I use the analogy also of our own internal organs in our body. When we eat something, we don't think or plan or intentionally have our organs digest the food, absorb the nutrients to give us strength and energy. It just happens. And I point out that which we take for granted, the laws of nature, the laws of our own biological workings as a living entity, is the same thing with the market. But in the market, what guides and directs this are a certain set of institutions: private property, individual freedom, and voluntary exchange in a system of division of labor. We each pick our own goals and purposes, our employments, our lines of production, our ways of earning a living, and we get coordinated with everyone else, not by direct plans by government, but through the competitive price system of the society. Businessmen look at the prices and see what consumers want, and they, in their individual plans, organize production, hire workers at wages that workers find attractive, that these are the most profitable employments that employers think I could be hired for, as opposed to being employed by Joe making a different product instead. And this coordination, therefore, occurs through the competitive pricing system without anyone having to overarchingly plan for it. And furthermore, since the time of Adam Smith in the 1770s, we've also come to understand that the resulting operation of such an economy, it's coordinative cooperation without government direction or planning, in fact, generates greater prosperity, greatest latitude of personal freedom, and greater innovative opportunity for all to be better off than if someone was trying to plan it from the center with the arrogance, the hubris, the presumption that they have enough knowledge, wisdom, and ability to know enough compared to all the dispersed and decentralized knowledge of how to do, where to do, when to do, with whom to do, that occurs through the interactions of our individual minds and all of the knowledge that we each respectively possess. The total knowledge of the world that is dispersed among all of us, and our skills, our abilities, our know-hows, our judgments, are far greater than any one mind or even the most intelligent of group of minds could ever hope to do better than just allowing people to be free in the interactions of the marketplace. And at the end of the day, that is the miracle of the marketplace. The food is grown and is in the supermarket every day. The clothes that we wear, we've purchased in department stores or other types of clothing outlets, and they're there when we want them, as we want them, usually in the styles and sizes we need, and at prices we often are willing to pay, without central direction. This is the miracle of the market of free people serving their own interests and the betterment of everyone without any paternalistic government directing, dictating, or commanding what everyone has to do. It combines freedom and prosperity.
Well, I think you've just articulated much of what Hayek talked about when he talked about the problems of socialism and, of course, central planning of the socialistic system, where they desire to either own or control the means of production, is the knowledge problem. And in the central planning, I mean, I look at the knowledge problem in our business. I think of all the meetings that we have, and we internally plan. We have limited resources in our business. We have certain goals and aspirations of products and services we wish to create. We have to create something of enough subjective value to a consumer that they would voluntarily want to purchase it, or my competitor will. But I'm grateful that my industry does not have some huge bureaucratic central planning organization trying to, pull all of the levers in the right sequence. What could possibly go wrong? Well, we have plenty of examples of what can possibly go wrong, but yet there's plenty of planning that goes on in our business, in our shop, on a daily, weekly basis. And the managers, owners of our business hold all of our employees and their roles that they play in our business model accountable. But I don't need the heavy hand of government to make these choices for us or tell us what products and services we should add to our menu or subtract from our menu. It gets done in a voluntary way, and our capital is at risk every day. The government's not putting any capital at risk. The shareholders of our company has supplied the capital at risk.
Yeah, this is another element that I think that is important, is that everyone plans, but without a single plan. And that's an issue or an element that a number of critics of heavy-handed government regulation, intervention, or socialism have pointed out, John. And that is, the issue is not whether to plan or not plan, because the socialists traditionally would say it's either chaos, anarchy in the most negative sense, in the sense of nothing holding things together, or a plan that directs and commands and coordinates everything. But the critics of socialism and big government have often pointed out it's not a matter of whether planning is good or not. The question is, whose plan?
Right.
So each of us have the latitude and liberty to make our own individual plans and coordinate our plans freely with others through our mutually agreed upon associations and trades and interactions with others? Or shall some people arrogantly, with hubris and presumption, attempt through the power of government to impose one plan or a handful of plans on all of us, to which we all must conform, and into which we shall be confined. And that's the difference between a free society, including in its economic dimensions, of which we've been focusing on, and a command or controlled or dictatorial or totalitarian society. Shall each of us be free to make our own plans and find our own avenues of betterment and happiness, or shall some arrogantly presume to mold and confine all of us to fit the model of what they consider to be good, not just for themselves, but for everyone in society, whether others agree with them or want to go along with it or not?
Well, as an example of this kind of freedom and the productivity of the freedom, I know you probably had the opportunity to meet Leonard Read, and of course he wrote the famous essay titled "I Pencil." Share with our audience the making of the pencil and why this essay has so withstood the test of time. As a matter of fact, I remember watching a YouTube video once where Milton Friedman suggested this is one of his favorite essays of all time, "I Pencil."
Yeah. Now, Leonard Read, for listeners or viewers who are not maybe too familiar, was the founder and longtime first president of the Foundation for Economic Education, one of the first freedom-oriented think tanks or educational organizations established in the 20th century in 1946. And in 1958, he wrote this essay called "I Pencil," in which he basically was, in one way, John, trying to make, in a colloquial, everyday, and commonsensical articulation, the very ideas that Hayek was talking about decentralized knowledge, in a more academic way earlier. And that was, Leonard Read says, all of us are familiar with the everyday, ordinary lead pencil that we pick up, we use, we write things with, we make notes, and so on. But who knows how to make this pencil? If we ask the question, well, where has the wood come from that of which the pencil is primarily made? From where was the graphite obtained, extracted out of the ground, by which people, and who made the machinery, the digging and excavating equipment that enabled the graphite to be taken out of the ground? And when the wood was chopped down in the forest, how was the wood transported to what lumber facility, and with what skills and abilities was the wood prepared, that tree trunk, into the forms that eventually would be the basis of this pencil? And who designed the machines and built the machines, and with what, again, skills and knowledge and ability that enabled the wood to be cut up in the lumber mill, and so on? And then what about that little piece of tin that holds the eraser at the tip of the pencil? Where did this tin come from, and how was it mined, and with what human skills and machinery and equipment? And what about that eraser? What the hell is this eraser? What is it actually made of? Is it made of rubber or something else? And what's the machinery that binds that binds the pencil together, that puts the graphite inside the pencil, that then attaches the eraser to the wood pencil with the aluminum wrapping? How was all this done? And how did these pencils then get embossed? You know, pencils often have either a standard company name, that is the company that made the pencil, or they'll emboss the company that's using them for promotional or other types of production purposes. How did they emboss a pencil? With what ink and dyes? What equipment was needed for that? And then transported to a retail store that at some point, when just we're not even thinking about it, but realize we need a writing instrument, we'll walk into a stationery store and buy a box of pencils. How did this all come about? And Reed was suggesting that if it was necessary for any one of us to have the knowledge, wisdom, and ability to know all of the detailed and specific and particular knowledge, to do all of these stages and steps and somehow get them all coordinated in just the right way, at the right time, and in the right sequence, so that we can then, as a consumer, walk in and, without ever thinking about it, buy a box of wood pencils, it would never get manufactured.
It's a beautiful story. It's timeless. And, Richard, it makes us think, how did we ever live without the Central Planning Pencil Bureau in Washington, D.C., arranging all of these inputs? And no one would ever consider the pencil czar in Washington, D.C., unless they were out of their mind, because what coordinates all these inputs is the price system. Voluntary exchange, the division of labor, the profit motive. It's the price system, because all of these parties you just named, they will probably never meet one another in their lifetime.
Yes, if you think about it, John, we often go into the stores now, and when you look at the label or the tag as to where it was manufactured, it's almost become a cliche, oh, made in China. And by the way, that is a bit of an exaggeration. According to the latest government international trade statistics about the U.S. Pattern of imports from other countries around the world, actually we only import about 20% of goods from China. 80% of all other imports coming to the United States come from other trading partners, and the majority of them being Canada and Mexico. But for the sake of the example, we turn over this label and we say, oh, made in China. Well, China is on the other side of the world, about 10,000 or so miles away. And these goods are manufactured in factories with machines, with people managing the factories or working in the factories who know nothing about you or me or all the other people who want to buy these products. They don't know about our existence as individuals. They really have no idea why we would want these products, the particular occasion to wear a dress or a pair of pants, the particular consumer items and the specific events for which we would want to use them in our homes or in other settings. They know nothing about us. And to be honest, they don't care about us. But what the price system does, as you're suggesting, acts as the informational and communication tool that informs others literally on the other side of the world that through this price signal, there are people in America who might be interested in purchasing products X, Y, and Z with features A, B, and C. And if they can be manufactured in productive and efficient ways that involve total expenses of manufacturing less than what is thought an American would be willing to pay for the product, then it's profitable to try to produce it, transport it, and market it to Americans, even those people in China will never know us or meet us or really, as an individual basis, care about us. But they end up producing the products that we want that make our life in some big or small way better, more convenient, more comfortable. So taken for granted the way it is. And that is how the world gets coordinated in all it's done without anybody having to directly communicate with each other in these supply and demand, consumer and producer ways. All through the communications device of prices that brings about this cooperative coordination. That's part of the miracle of the market, that we are now a world economy. We're separate nation states with multitudes of, 140 different governments on this planet, I gather, somewhere, if you look at how many nations belong to the UN, I guess. But the fact is that we are a global community of people participating in a division of labor of mutual gains from trade held together through the global price system. And that makes all of us better off. And in fact, having quality and standards of living that would otherwise be impossible.
Yeah, I really have gotten in touch with this and become a super fan, champion for the free market. And I'm especially so with the election of our president and him imposing tariffs. Tariffs, in my mind, Richard, and I'm sure we'll probably think along the same lines, are nothing but really taxes on finished goods. And nobody really wins in a trade war. It's only who loses the least. There are no winners in a trade war. And free trade is so important over and above the economic principles to peace and prosperity. I believe it was Mises that said, if goods don't move across borders, troops will. And that is as true today as it was 500 years ago. What's your feeling about the tariff situation?
I think that the tariffs are a way of putting walls between people when the people neither want nor need the walls. You were pointing out that tariffs are ultimately a tax on the consumer who purchases a product. The President of the United States has attempted to argue, both before and since taking office, in the White House. That the nation upon which we're imposing this tariff pays the tariff. That it's primarily hurting them, and the answer that's not the case. The fact is that if we're talking about the Chinese, because that's the sort of the unofficial trade war that we've been involved with China, the Chinese manufacturer has his costs of production in his factory somewhere in China. Then there are the additional expenses of transportation, either by air or by shipping across the Pacific to the United States. And at the point of arrival in the United States, before that Chinese manufactured good can then be taken off the dock, removed from that shipping container at the port of entry, the wholesaler at some stage has to pay a tax, because the U.S. customs agents will not release it until that import duty is paid, and that becomes part of the cost of production, which the wholesaler is going to have to pass on to the retailer, the same way he has to anticipate earning a price sufficient to cover the manufacturing expenses of the Chinese producer and the transportation costs of bringing it across the Pacific to the United States, and then selling it to the retailer. Otherwise, his revenues may not be covered by the full cost, including that import duty. And then the wholesaler, having sold it to the retailer, is putting the retailer in the position of having to incorporate that expense, which is just the part of the charge that the wholesaler tells him the good is going to cost him if he wants to then sell it to the direct consumer, you and me, that he has to include in the price that he puts on the shelf or on the tag that we experience when we go into the store. So at the end of the day, it is ultimately the American consumers who are paying these tens of billions of dollars of additional customs revenues that the U.S. government is collecting from the import wholesaler, but is then passed on as part of the cost of the product to the American consumer. We ultimately pay this. We end up paying higher prices for the goods that we're purchasing that happen to be manufactured abroad. We're seeing a narrowing of the options and opportunities, because some of these foreign sellers will discover that given that the price has to include the import duty, they cannot profitably find a wholesaler who'd be willing to buy as much or any of it as in the past. And yes, that has a negative effect on the Chinese manufacturer, but only because the burden of the tax is going to be impinging on the American consumer, and therefore making it less profitable or possible for the Chinese manufacturer to sell as much in the U.S. And then the other fact is that this means that the American consumer may have to then decide that, because the import duty has been imposed on this foreign import, to select a domestic product that may be less expensive than the imported good, including the import tax on it, but is one he would have never chosen, either because it would have seemed too costly to him, or not of the right quality or features and characteristics he's looking for, if not for the foreign import being made more expensive to him and the store because of the import tax imposed upon it. And that's giving artificially business to American producers who are not able to match a more productive and efficient foreign seller, if not for the government imposing this additional expense on the consumer to have the freedom of his choice.
Insane. You know, in your work, you wrote another paper titled "Interest Rates Need to Tell the Truth," and it goes on to make the point that market prices, and an interest rate is a price for credit, is that market prices emerge out of a discovery process. With the time we have remaining, which is just a couple of minutes, give me your Cliff Note version of why supply and demand, not the Federal Reserve System or other central planning organizations, need to determine the price of credit.
Well, basically because the ability to undertake investment requires the accessibility to real resources for manufacture. If you're going to make, let's suppose that we're interested in making ovens. Well, we have to have resources set aside out of the resources generally available to both make an oven to make bread that's going to replace an oven that will eventually wear out that's currently in use making the bread that we consume. And if we want to increase our standard of living and to make a second oven so we can have more bread as consumers to consume, resources have to be freed up from other uses in the society, more direct consumer-oriented uses. So people have to choose to save. And then those who want to borrow that savings have to know, well, what is it going to cost me? Given the supply of savings in the economy, would it be profitable for me to undertake an investment that might be profitable when the investment project is completed and I'm offering a finished good to the consumers? So the investor, to know whether a project is profitable, must be able to compare what the anticipated profit, if successful, relative to the cost of borrowing. That tells him what investments are profitable and which are not. And it also tells him indirectly, well, what is the amount of savings that people have chose not to consume out of earned income to sustain investments in the economy? That the rate of interest brings, therefore, these two sides of the market into balance. The willingness to save out of income by some income earners and the desire to borrow to undertake investment and other purposes in the economy. And the interest rate brings those two sides into balance, just like the price of bananas brings the supply and demand of bananas into balance, or the supply and demand for bicycles into balance. Now, with the Federal Reserve manipulating interest rates and invariably below the rates that the market would have set, this is thrown out of whack. This is, in other words, investors don't know what the real cost of borrowing is. I think I can undertake a project, and it would cost me 1% interest to borrow, and I expect I can make 2 or 3% profit. So I pay back the loan at 1%. I've made a 1 or 2% profit on net. But that's because the government has artificially influenced this through the central bank. The fact is, if the market was telling the truth, well, the real cost of borrowing, given the available savings, is 4% or 3%, it would be telling him that some investments are not worth undertaking. He is misallocating, misdirecting, wasting, incorrectly applying the scarce resources of society that don't represent what people would most value to have produced, given the real cost of the resources to acquire them. So basically, government interest rate manipulation throws the supply and demand of financial markets out of whack. That's why we have these business cycles, these financial crises, such as in '08. For 5 years before the 2008 crisis, interest rates were pushed so low that when adjusted for inflation, they were negative. Money was being given away. So how do you know what the real cost of borrowing is? You undertake investments without judicious cautiousness as to whether they are really effective, cost-effective, given the scarcity of the resources to manufacture them. And after this crisis, what has the Federal Reserve done for the last 10 years or so? It has done the same thing. It has expanded the amount of reserves into the banking system artificially through a money creation process that we don't have the time to discuss in detail. And interest rates, again, have been practically zero. So the point is, we have financial markets with no pricing signal, no pricing information. And while no one has a crystal ball to say, well, when is an economic recovery going to end and it will turn into another downturn, nobody knows that. It could happen a month from now. It could happen from 2 years from now.
Yep.
But the fact is, when you prevent markets from functioning and you destroy the price system that is meant to coordinate and balance things, don't be surprised if things are thrown out of whack and eventually a financial crisis will hit us once more.
And we start to see symptoms of that with things like the repo crisis recently. We've been talking today with Dr. Richard Ebeling. He's a noted Austrian economist, professor at the Citadel University. TJ, let's put his books up here. He has 3 beautiful books at Amazon that I can pick up quite a bit. For New Liberalism, there's another second book, Monetary Central Planning in the State. And one of my favorite books is Austrian Economics and Public Policy. And I would strongly encourage you to all go to Amazon, do a search under Richard Ebeling. Pick up these books. They make a fantastic stocking stuffer for your holiday gift. That's the gift you need to get for that father-in-law, that brother-in-law, that son of yours who's got absolutely everything, and you want to put a little bit of economic wisdom in his stocking instead of a lump of coal. these books you need to pick up. Richard, thank you very much for your time. Your wisdom is really, really appreciated for our audience.
Well, thank you very much, and I want to wish you and all in the audience a most Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year.
Same to you. Same to you. Well, tomorrow will be our last show of the week, and then we're going to probably take a little bit of a break for the holiday. But we're going to have Dr. Murray Sabrin on, who's a professor of economics as well in New Jersey, and we're going to talk more about some of these topics. And he's written a very interesting book entitled Why the Fed Sucks. And I think for most of you, you want to figure out the answer to that question. I'm John O'Donnell, sitting in for Merlin. Peace. Happy holidays.